Muslim teen mocked by teacher, then ends up owning the school. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The classroom buzzed with the subdued hum of students flipping pages, the occasional whispered exchange breaking the silence. Amal, a quiet 16-year-old girl in her neatly pressed uniform, sat at the back of the room, her hijab a soft shade of olive green. She rarely spoke unless called upon, preferring to keep her head down and focus on her studies. But today was different. Today she could feel eyes on her, the weight of whispers that weren't meant to reach her ears but did nonetheless. "Do you think she hides a bomb under that thing?" Someone snickered, too low for the teacher to hear but loud enough to make Amal's ears burn. She clenched her pen tighter, her knuckles whitening, but didn't turn around. She had learned over time that reacting only fed the fire. Mr. Collins, the history teacher, paced at the front of the room, gesturing dramatically as he explained the American Revolution. He was a man who loved the sound of his own voice, often monopolizing the class time with his opinions rather than engaging students in discussion. Amal liked history. She had always been fascinated by stories of resistance and change, but Mr. Collins made it hard to enjoy. His subtle jabs, his dismissive tone whenever she raised her hand, his reluctance to pronounce her name correctly even after years of teaching her, all of it had chipped away at her enthusiasm. Amal? Whatever. Can you tell me what sparked the Boston Tea Party?" Mr. Collins asked, his tone bordering on contempt as he squinted at her from across the room. "It was a protest against taxation without representation," Amal replied softly but confidently, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Correct. But maybe speak up next time." "You're barely audible," he said, waving her off as he turned back to the whiteboard. A ripple of laughter swept through the class. Amal's cheeks flushed. She had spoken at a perfectly normal volume. Everyone had heard her. This wasn't about her voice. It was about Mr. Collins asserting his authority, reminding her, and everyone else, that she didn't quite belong. As the lesson continued, Amal tried to focus, but her thoughts kept drifting. She had grown used to microaggressions, the subtle and not so subtle ways people reminded her that she was different, but it didn't make them any easier to bear. Each comment, each laugh chipped away at her resolve, leaving her questioning her place in the world. When the bell finally rang, Amal gathered her books quickly, hoping to avoid the usual gauntlet of comments as she made her way to the door. But Mr. Collins' voice stopped her in her tracks. "Amal, stay back for a moment." Her stomach sank. She approached his desk cautiously, the eyes of her classmates lingering on her as they filed out of the room. When the door finally closed, leaving them alone, Mr. Collins leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression that made her feel small. "Amal, I've noticed you've been rather distracted lately. Is everything all right at home?" His tone was laced with condescension, as if her academic performance, or lack thereof, was somehow tied to her identity. "I'm fine, Mr. Collins," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. Good. Because I'd hate to think that outside influences are affecting your education. You know, Amal, you have potential, but you need to work harder to fit in. Blend more. Maybe try participating more in class discussions?" Amal's jaw tightened. "I do participate." "Do you?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Well, maybe you could participate more effectively. And about the hijab, have you ever considered how it might make others uncomfortable? This is a place of learning, after all." The words hit her like a slap. Amal felt her cheeks burn, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She nodded stiffly, mumbled a polite acknowledgement, and left the room as quickly as she could. By the time Amal reached home that evening, the weight of the day had settled heavily on her shoulders. Her mother noticed immediately. "Amal Habibti, what's wrong?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Nothing, Mama," Amal replied, forcing a smile. "Just school stuff." Her mother didn't press further, but Amal knew she wasn't convinced. Still, she was grateful for the silence. She wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Instead, she retreated to her room, where she could unpack her thoughts in solitude. She opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she poured her frustration into words. Amal had always been a writer. It was how she made sense of the world, how she expressed the thoughts and emotions she couldn't articulate out loud. Tonight, she wrote about Mr. Collins, about the classroom, about the way the world seemed to shrink around her whenever she walked into that building. But she also wrote about resistance, about courage, about the power of standing up for oneself. When she finally closed her laptop, Amal felt lighter. Writing didn't fix the problem, but it gave her clarity. It reminded her of her worth, of her voice. and it planted a seed of determination that began to take root in her heart. The next day, Amal walked into class with her head held high. The whispers, the stares, the snickers, they were all still there. But this time she didn't let them touch her. When Mr. Collins called on her, she answered with confidence. When he dismissed her, she stood her ground. And when he made another comment about her hijab, she met his gaze squarely and said, "I'm here to learn, just like everyone else. My hijab doesn't change that." The room fell silent. For a moment, Amal thought Mr. Collins might actually acknowledge her point. But instead, he smirked and said, "Let's move on." Still, the small act of defiance filled her with a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt before. Amal realized that change wouldn't come overnight, but it had to start somewhere. And if no one else was willing to take that first step, she would. Little did she know her words, and her determination, were about to set off a chain of events that would change everything. Amal's defiance didn't go unnoticed. The silence that followed her words lingered in the minds of her classmates, many of whom had never seen anyone stand up to Mr. Collins before. But Amal wasn't under any illusion that she had won that moment. If anything, Mr. Collins seemed more irritated with her than ever, and she could feel the tension thickening with each passing day. By the end of the week, Amal's mother confronted her again. "Amal, something's been weighing on you. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I see it. Please tell me what's going on at school." Amal hesitated. She hated burdening her mother with her problems, knowing how hard her family worked to make sure she had opportunities they never did. But her mother's gaze was unwavering, full of love and concern. Slowly, Amal began to explain. She recounted the whispers, the microaggressions, the outright dismissiveness from Mr. Collins. Her mother listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to anger. When Amal finally finished, her mother reached out and took her hands. "Habibti, you don't have to face this alone. We'll figure this out together." That evening, Amal's mother sat down at the computer and began drafting an email to the school administration. She detailed the incidents Amal had described, highlighting the discriminatory comments and the hostile environment her daughter endured daily. Amal watched from the doorway, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She wanted change, but she also feared the backlash. The following week, Amal was called to the principal's office. As she sat in the small, sterile room, she couldn't shake the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The principal, Mrs. Bennett, entered the room and sat across from her, folding her hands on the desk. "Amal, I've read your mother's email, and I want to assure you that we take these matters very seriously," Mrs. Bennett began, her tone measured. "We've spoken to Mr. Collins and he's assured us that there's been a misunderstanding. He didn't intend to offend you or make you feel unwelcome." Amal's heart sank. A misunderstanding? How could anyone misunderstand what had been said? She looked at Mrs. Bennett, searching for any sign of genuine concern, but all she saw was a woman eager to sweep the issue under the rug. "Amal, I know this must be difficult for you," Mrs. Bennett continued. "But perhaps if you focused on your studies and tried to avoid any unnecessary conflict, things might improve." Amal left the office feeling more defeated than ever. The administration wasn't going to help her. If anything, they seemed more interested in protecting Mr. Collins than addressing the problem. But as she walked back to class, a thought began to form in her mind. If the school wouldn't stand up for her, she would have to stand up for herself. That evening, Amal revisited her laptop, this time with a new sense of purpose. She began drafting an essay, pouring her experiences onto the page with raw honesty. She wrote about the challenges of being a Muslim girl in a predominantly white school, about the subtle and overt ways she was made to feel like an outsider, and about the strength it took to keep showing up every day. But she didn't stop there. She wrote about resilience, about the power of speaking up, and about the change that could come if people were willing to listen. When she finished, she submitted the essay to a national writing contest she had heard about months ago but never thought she had a chance of winning. She didn't expect much to come of it, but it felt good to do something, to turn her pain into something meaningful. Weeks passed and life at school continued as usual. Mr. Collins remained dismissive, the whispers persisted, and Amal kept her head down, focusing on her studies and her writing. But one afternoon, as she was packing up her books at the end of the day, her phone buzzed with an email notification. "Dear Amal, congratulations. Your essay, The Quiet Strength of a Hijabi, has been selected as the grand prize winner of the National Voices for Change Writing Contest." Amal's heart raced as she read the email. The grand prize included a substantial scholarship, a feature in a major magazine, and an invitation to speak at a national education conference. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt seen, not as an outsider but as someone with a voice that mattered. The news spread quickly. Within days, Amal's story was featured in local newspapers and online platforms. Her classmates, who had once dismissed her as the quiet girl in the back of the room, suddenly saw her in a new light. Teachers who had barely acknowledged her began congratulating her in the hallways. Even Mr. Collins, though clearly uncomfortable, offered a terse, "Good job." But Amal didn't let the sudden attention distract her from her purpose. She used the platform she had been given to advocate for inclusivity and respect in schools, sharing her experiences and calling for change. When the day of the conference arrived, Amal stood on stage before a packed audience, her hijab shimmering under the lights. She spoke with a clarity and confidence that surprised even herself, recounting her journey and challenging educators to create environments where every student felt valued and respected. In the audience, her mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She had always known Amal was special, but seeing her daughter stand tall and unapologetic in front of so many people filled her with a pride that words couldn't capture. Back at school, things began to change. The administration implemented new diversity and inclusion training for staff, and Mr. Collins was reassigned to a different grade level. But the most significant change was in Amal herself. She no longer walked the halls with her head down. She held it high, knowing that her voice had power, that she had the strength to create change not just for herself but for others like her. Amal's journey wasn't over. There were still challenges to face, still battles to fight. But she knew she wasn't alone. And as she sat in class, pen in hand, she felt a quiet sense of determination. She had found her voice, and she wasn't going to let anyone silence it again. And little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of her incredible story. Amal's newfound confidence began to ripple through her community. Her essay and her speech at the conference sparked conversations not just at school but across her town. Parents began asking tougher questions at school board meetings, students began standing up for one another, and even teachers started reflecting on their biases. Amal's quiet strength had ignited a movement. But Amal wasn't satisfied. She knew that systemic change required more than speeches and articles. It required action. Inspired by the response to her story, she began collaborating with local organizations to develop workshops for students and educators. The workshops focused on fostering empathy, understanding cultural differences, and addressing implicit bias. Amal volunteered her weekends to lead discussions, sharing her own experiences to help others see the impact of their words and actions. Her work didn't go unnoticed. Invitations poured in from schools and community centers across the state, each asking Amal to share her story and lead workshops. She balanced these commitments with her schoolwork, often staying up late to prepare presentations or write new articles. It was exhausting, but it was also invigorating. Amal felt like she was finally making a difference, not just for herself but for so many others who had faced similar struggles. One day, as Amal was walking to her locker, she was approached by a girl she barely knew. The girl looked nervous, clutching the straps of her backpack tightly. "Amal," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've been doing. I wear a hijab too, and it's been really hard. But seeing you stand up for yourself, it's made me feel like I can do the same." Amal felt a lump rise in her throat. She reached out and squeezed the girl's hand. "You're not alone," she said. "And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Moments like these reminded Amal why she had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about fighting her own battles, it was about creating a world where no one had to fight them alone. As the months passed, Amal's impact continued to grow. She was invited to join a state-level advisory council on education, where she worked alongside policymakers to develop initiatives aimed at promoting equity and inclusion in schools. She also began planning for college, with dreams of studying education policy so she could continue her work on a larger scale. But even as she looked to the future, Amal remained grounded in her community. She continued to attend her small high school, walking the same halls where she had once felt so invisible. Only now, she walked with her head held high, her presence a reminder of the power of resilience and determination. And though her journey was far from over, Amal knew one thing for certain. She had found her voice, and she was going to use it to change the world. As Amal's story gained momentum, the changes she had sparked began to ripple even further. Her advocacy caught the attention of local news outlets, and soon after, national publications started covering her journey. Interviews, podcasts, and feature articles painted Amal as a symbol of resilience, a young woman who had turned adversity into an opportunity for change. But as her platform grew, so did the challenges. Online trolls began leaving hateful comments on her posts and articles, questioning her motives and mocking her identity. Some people in her school, though quieter than before, still treated her with thinly veiled hostility. Even some teachers were wary, feeling threatened by her calls for accountability. Amal faced it all with the same quiet strength she had always relied on. But inside she felt the strain. One evening, after finishing a workshop for a local youth group, she broke down in tears in her mother's arms. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she whispered. "It feels like no matter how much I try, there's always someone ready to tear me down." Her mother, ever her anchor, held her tightly. "Change is never easy, Habibti. But you are stronger than you think. And you're not alone in this fight. Look around you, see the people you've inspired, the voices you've helped amplify. That's your power." Amal nodded, wiping her tears. Her mother's words reminded her of why she had started this journey. It wasn't just about her, it was about the countless others who felt unseen, unheard, and unvalued. She couldn't let them down. As Amal pushed forward, her work began to attract the attention of influential figures. One day, she received an email from a well-known education advocate, who invited her to join a panel discussion on creating inclusive schools. Amal was nervous but excited. She spent hours preparing, determined to make the most of the opportunity. The panel took place in a grand auditorium, filled with educators, policymakers, and students from across the country. When it was her turn to speak, Amal stood tall, her voice clear and steady as she shared her experiences and called for bold action to address systemic inequities in education. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning her a standing ovation. After the event, several attendees approached her, including leaders from major education organizations. They praised her courage and offered their support, opening doors to new opportunities and collaborations. Back at school, the changes Amal had fought for were slowly taking root. The administration had implemented new training programs for teachers, and student-led initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity were gaining traction. Mr. Collins, whose behavior had sparked much of Amal's advocacy, had been reassigned to another school. Though he never apologized directly, Amal knew his absence was a small victory. Her classmates too began to see her in a new light. Many who had once ignored or dismissed her now sought her out for advice and support. Amal welcomed these interactions, knowing that real change required building bridges and fostering understanding. One day during lunch, a group of students approached her with an idea. "Amal," one of them said, "we've been thinking. What if we start a diversity council? A group where students can share their experiences and work together to make our school more inclusive?" Amal's eyes lit up. "I think that's a fantastic idea. Let's make it happen." With Amal's guidance, the Diversity Council was formed, quickly becoming a powerful force for positive change. Students from all backgrounds came together to share their stories, celebrate their differences, and collaborate on initiatives to promote equity and inclusion. Amal's heart swelled with pride as she watched her peers take ownership of the movement she had started. Months later, as Amal prepared to graduate, she reflected on how far she had come. The girl who had once felt invisible now stood as a leader, a change maker, and an inspiration to many. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every struggle, every tear, and every moment of doubt. At her graduation ceremony, Amal was invited to give a speech as the valedictorian of her class. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the sea of faces, her classmates, teachers, family, and community members, and smiled. "I once thought that being different was a weakness," she began. "But I've learned that our differences are our greatest strengths. They challenge us, shape us, and push us to grow. I'm standing here today because I refuse to let anyone define my worth. And I hope my journey reminds you that you, too, have the power to create change." The crowd erupted in applause, tears streaming down the faces of many. Amal's mother, sitting in the front row, beamed with pride, knowing that her daughter's voice had not only changed her own life but had also touched countless others. As Amal walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This chapter of her life was coming to an end, but she knew her journey was far from over. With her head held high and her heart full of hope, she stepped forward into a future she was ready to shape. Amal's post-graduation journey began with a whirlwind of activity. Her speech at the graduation ceremony, now viral on social media, continued to gain traction. National media outlets highlighted her as a rising star in the fight for equity in education. She was inundated with requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and partnerships. Despite the overwhelming attention, Amal stayed grounded. Her focus remained on using her platform to make a meaningful impact. She enrolled in a prestigious university, majoring in social justice and education policy, while continuing to work with grassroots organizations that supported marginalized communities. One of the first initiatives she spearheaded was a mentorship program for high school students facing discrimination. She partnered with her former school's diversity council to pilot the program, pairing students with mentors who could guide them through the challenges of navigating systemic bias and help them build their confidence. Amal's program became an instant success. Students who once felt isolated now found solace and strength in their connections with mentors who understood their struggles. The program expanded to other schools in the district, and soon after, it was adopted at the state level. While Amal was thriving academically and professionally, she faced personal challenges that tested her resolve. As her profile grew, so did the scrutiny. Social media trolls and detractors intensified their efforts, questioning her authenticity and motives. Some even launched smear campaigns, spreading false narratives to undermine her work. Initially, the negativity stung. Amal spent sleepless nights reading hateful comments and doubting herself. But with the support of her family and mentors, she learned to navigate the storm. Amal, her mother said one evening, "Remember what your name means. Means hope. And that's exactly what you're giving to so many people. Don't let a few voices of hate drown out the chorus of love and support around you." Her mother's words reignited her determination. Amal focused on the positive impact she was making, knowing that the voices of those she was helping far outweighed the noise of her detractors. As her influence grew, Amal was invited to join a national task force on education reform. The task force included educators, policymakers, and activists from across the country, all united by a shared vision of creating equitable learning environments. Amal, the youngest member, brought a fresh perspective and a relentless passion for change. During one of their meetings, Amal proposed a bold idea: a nationwide campaign to combat discrimination in schools, featuring student-led initiatives, teacher training programs, and community workshops. Change has to start at the grassroots level, she argued. We need to empower students and teachers to be the change makers in their own communities. Her proposal was met with enthusiastic support. Over the next year, Amal worked tirelessly to bring the campaign to life. She traveled across the country, visiting schools, speaking at events, and meeting with students and educators. Each interaction reinforced her belief in the power of collective action. Back in her hometown, Amal's former high school was undergoing a transformation. The Diversity Council she had helped establish had grown into a robust organization, leading initiatives that celebrated inclusivity and addressed systemic issues within the school. One day, Amal received a call from the new principal of her high school. "Amal," he said, "we're planning a dedication ceremony for the new community center we're building on campus. We'd like to name it after you in recognition of your contributions." Amal was stunned. "I'm honored," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "But this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who believed in the power of change and worked alongside me to make it happen." The ceremony was a beautiful celebration of unity and resilience. Students, teachers, and community members gathered to honor Amal and the movement she had sparked. As she stood before the crowd, unveiling the plaque that bore her name, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "This isn't just a building," she said in her speech. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together with open hearts and minds. It's a testament to the strength of our community and the belief that every voice matters." Years later, Amal's impact continued to grow. She founded an organization dedicated to creating inclusive educational environments, offering resources, training, and advocacy for schools across the country. Her work earned her numerous accolades, including a spot on a prestigious 30 Under 30 list and an invitation to deliver a keynote address at an international education conference. Despite her achievements, Amal remained humble. She often returned to her hometown, visiting the community center that bore her name and connecting with the students who now led the Diversity Council. Each visit reminded her of where she had started and why she had embarked on this journey. One evening, as she walked through the halls of her old high school, she encountered a young girl wearing a hijab, sitting alone in the library. Amal approached her and introduced herself. "I know it can be tough sometimes," Amal said, sitting beside the girl. "But I want you to know that you're not alone. You have a voice and it's powerful. Don't be afraid to use it." The girl looked up at Amal, her eyes filled with determination. "Thank you," she said. "I won't forget that." As Amal walked out of the school that night, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come full circle, from a young girl silenced by prejudice to a leader amplifying the voices of others. Her journey was proof that hope, resilience, and collective action could create a brighter, more inclusive future. Amal's life became a testament to the strength of community and the ripple effect of empowerment. Her organization, Voices of Change, gained global recognition for transforming how schools approach diversity and inclusion. What started as a local initiative had blossomed into an international movement, touching lives across continents. One of the organization's signature programs, Empower the Educators, trained teachers on culturally responsive pedagogy. The program provided tools for educators to recognize and address their biases, fostering classrooms where every student felt seen and valued. Schools that adopted the program reported significant reductions in incidents of discrimination and bullying, alongside marked improvements in student engagement and achievement. Amal's speeches became legendary, blending personal anecdotes with actionable insights. She often recounted her own experiences of feeling alienated in school and how small acts of kindness had given her the strength to persevere. Her authenticity resonated deeply with audiences, inspiring countless individuals to join her mission. As her influence expanded, Amal found herself in rooms she had once dreamed of. She met world leaders, collaborated with tech giants to create educational tools, and even spoke at the United Nations about the role of education in fostering global peace. Yet she never lost sight of her roots. She often returned to her hometown to mentor students at her former high school. One afternoon, she visited the community center that bore her name. Inside, she saw a group of students rehearsing a play about overcoming prejudice. As she watched, a young girl approached her hesitantly. "Are you Amal?" the girl asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I am," Amal replied with a warm smile. "My name is Layla," the girl said. "I'm part of the Diversity Council. We've read so much about you. You've inspired us to start a campaign against hate speech in our school." Amal felt a surge of pride. "That's incredible, Layla. Tell me more about it." Layla explained how the council had partnered with local artists to create murals and performances that celebrated unity and diversity. Amal listened intently, offering advice and encouragement. "You're doing amazing work," she said. "Remember, every step forward, no matter how small, makes a difference." One of the most transformative moments in Amal's journey came when she was invited to meet the President of the United States. The invitation was to honor her contributions to education and social justice. At the ceremony, Amal shared the stage with activists, educators, and changemakers from around the world. In her speech, Amal reflected on the power of resilience and community. "When I was younger, I often felt invisible, silenced by prejudice," she said. "But I've learned that our voices are our greatest strength. When we come together, we can shatter barriers and build bridges. This honor isn't just for me, it's for everyone who has ever felt unseen and chose to rise anyway." Her words brought the audience to their feet, a standing ovation that echoed the impact of her work. Despite her global success, Amal remained deeply committed to grassroots efforts. She established scholarships for underprivileged students, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't stand in the way of education. She also launched a fellowship program for aspiring educators from marginalized backgrounds, empowering them to become agents of change in their communities. Her organization's reach extended to conflict zones, partnering with local leaders to rebuild schools and provide trauma-informed education. Amal personally visited these areas, meeting with students and teachers who had endured unimaginable hardships. Their resilience fueled her own, reminding her of the universal importance of hope and education. As the years passed, Amal's legacy grew. She authored a best-selling memoir, From Silence to Strength, which became a touchstone for anyone fighting for justice. The book detailed her journey, offering both inspiration and practical advice for creating change. One chapter, titled The Teacher Who Changed Everything, was dedicated to the pivotal moment with Mr. Anderson. She described how his apology and support had set her on the path to healing and advocacy. The chapter concluded with a poignant message: sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in us. Be that person for someone else. Amal's work culminated in the creation of the Hope Academy Network, a global chain of schools that prioritized inclusivity, innovation, and community engagement. The schools became models for educational reform, blending technology with culturally responsive teaching to prepare students for a diverse and interconnected world. At the grand opening of the first Hope Academy, Amal stood before a crowd of students, parents, and educators. As she cut the ribbon, she reflected on how far she had come, from a young girl fighting to be heard to a leader shaping the future of education. In her speech, she addressed the students directly. "You are the future," she said. "Your voices, your ideas, and your dreams have the power to change the world. Never let anyone silence you. Stand tall, speak out, and know that you are capable of incredible things." Amal's story became a beacon of hope for generations to come. Her journey showed that even in the face of adversity, one person could ignite a movement and transform lives. Her name became synonymous with resilience, advocacy, and the belief that every voice matters. And as she continued her work, Amal never forgot the words her mother had told her: "Your name means hope. And hope is the most powerful force of all." Amal's legacy extended far beyond the physical schools and programs she established. She became a symbol of resilience and the transformative power of education, not just for marginalized communities but for the entire global landscape. Her work ignited countless conversations about equity, diversity, and the role of education in addressing systemic issues. One of the most significant moments in Amal's journey came when she was asked to deliver a keynote speech at the World Education Summit, an event attended by leaders, innovators, and policymakers from across the globe. The summit aimed to address the challenges facing education in the 21st century, and Amal's voice was deemed indispensable for the discourse. Standing on the grand stage, Amal felt a mixture of nerves and pride. The audience was composed of people she had once only read about in newspapers and seen on television: presidents, CEOs, and Nobel laureates. Yet, as she began to speak, her usual confidence surged forth, carried by the weight of her experiences. "I stand before you today as someone who once believed that my voice didn't matter," she began. "I was just a student, a child, trying to navigate a world that often seemed determined to silence me. But here I am, not because of privilege or power, but because I chose to believe in the transformative power of education and community." Her speech wove together personal anecdotes with broader insights into the state of global education. She spoke about the need to create learning environments that celebrated diversity, nurtured empathy, and equipped students with the tools to thrive in a complex, interconnected world. "We cannot afford to overlook the potential of any child," Amal emphasized. "Every student, regardless of their background, holds within them the capacity to change the world. It is our responsibility as educators, leaders, and citizens to ensure they have the opportunity to do so." The speech received a standing ovation, and Amal was inundated with messages from attendees who were deeply moved by her words. Many shared their own experiences of overcoming adversity, while others expressed a renewed commitment to creating inclusive educational systems. Amal's impact continued to ripple outward. Following the summit, she was invited to collaborate with organizations like UNESCO and UNICEF on initiatives aimed at promoting educational equity. She also worked with tech companies to develop tools that made learning more accessible for students in remote or underserved areas. Back in her hometown, Amal's presence was a source of pride for the community. The school that had once been a place of pain for her was now a hub of innovation and inclusion, thanks to her efforts. Students thrived in an environment that encouraged curiosity, creativity, and compassion. One day while visiting the school, Amal was approached by a young girl wearing a hijab. The girl, no older than 10, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Ms. Amal," she said shyly, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Amal knelt down to the girl's level, her heart swelling with emotion. "You don't have to be like me," she said gently. "You can be even greater. The world is waiting for your brilliance." The girl beamed, and Amal felt a renewed sense of purpose. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen this path, despite the challenges and sacrifices it often entailed. As Amal's work gained recognition, she was approached by filmmakers who wanted to tell her story. At first, she hesitated. Her journey was deeply personal, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to share it on such a large scale. But after much reflection, she agreed, realizing that her story could inspire others to pursue change. The resulting documentary, titled Hope in Action, became an international sensation. It chronicled Amal's life, from her struggles as a student to her rise as a global advocate for education. Audiences were moved by her authenticity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to her mission. The film won numerous awards and sparked conversations about the importance of representation and inclusion in media. For Amal, it was another opportunity to amplify the voices of those who were often overlooked. Despite her busy schedule, Amal made it a point to prioritize her personal well-being and relationships. She often spoke about the importance of self-care and surrounding oneself with supportive people. Her family remained her anchor, offering love and encouragement at every turn. In her downtime, Amal enjoyed simple pleasures: reading, cooking, and spending time with friends. She also found solace in writing, using her journal to reflect on her experiences and articulate her dreams for the future. One evening, as she wrote by the light of a candle, Amal paused to reread a passage she had penned earlier. "I may not have chosen the challenges I faced, but I chose how to respond to them. And in doing so, I discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. My hope is that others will find their own strength and use it to light the way for those who come after them." As the years went by, Amal's influence only grew. She was honored with countless awards, including the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize, which she accepted with characteristic humility. In her acceptance speech she said, "This prize is not just for me. It is for every student who has ever felt invisible, every teacher who has fought for their students' rights, and every community that has come together to create a better world." Let this be a reminder that education is not just a privilege, it is a right. And it is the key to unlocking a brighter future for all of us. Amal's words resonated deeply, and the prize further solidified her place as a trailblazer and visionary. Looking back on her journey, Amal felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had turned her pain into purpose, transforming the challenges she faced into opportunities for growth and impact. Her story was proof that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to rise, to lead, and to create change. And as she continued her work, she carried with her the lessons she had learned along the way, that hope was the most powerful force in the world, and that when we choose to believe in ourselves and each other, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Amal's story became more than just an individual journey, it became a global movement. Schools around the world began adopting her model of inclusive education, focusing on respect, empathy, and the empowerment of every student, regardless of their background or abilities. Educators attended seminars she hosted, eager to replicate the methods that had transformed not only academic performance but also the culture of learning environments. Her curriculum, called Bridges of Understanding, was translated into over 50 languages and adopted in classrooms spanning continents. It integrated critical thinking with cultural appreciation, challenging students to view diversity not as a barrier but as an asset. Amal believed that the classroom was not just a place for intellectual growth but a foundation for social change, where young minds could be shaped into compassionate leaders. One particularly emotional milestone came when Amal returned to her hometown for the unveiling of a statue dedicated to her work. The statue stood in the heart of the town square, surrounded by an inscribed plaque that read, "To those who choose to rise above adversity, your strength is a light for others to follow." The ceremony was attended by students, educators, and community members, many of whom had once doubted Amal's potential. Now they were her most ardent supporters, proud of how one of their own had made such an indelible mark on the world. As she stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd, Amal's mind wandered back to her teenage years. She thought of the time she had felt small, unworthy, and unheard. And now here she was, not only heard but celebrated. "I accept this honor not just for myself," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "but for every student who dreams of a better world, for every teacher who believes in the power of education, and for every community that dares to hope for something greater. This statue is not a monument to me, it is a testament to the power of possibility." After the ceremony, Amal spent hours meeting with attendees, listening to their stories and learning about the challenges they faced. One young girl approached her with tears in her eyes, clutching a handwritten letter. "Ms. Amal," the girl said, her voice trembling, "this is for you. You've made me believe that I can do anything." Amal read the letter later that evening, and it brought her to tears. The girl had detailed her struggles with bullying and self-doubt, but she also wrote about how Amal's story had given her the courage to pursue her dreams. Amal kept the letter in her journal, a reminder of why she had chosen this path. For every award she received, it was moments like these that meant the most to her. As her influence grew, Amal was invited to work with world leaders on education reform. She traveled to countries facing conflict, poverty, and systemic inequities, advocating for policies that prioritized education as a fundamental human right. In one particularly impactful project, she partnered with an international organization to rebuild schools in a war-torn region, ensuring that children could return to learning in safe, supportive environments. During one of her visits, a young boy approached her, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you really the lady who owns all the schools?" he asked. Amal laughed, kneeling to meet his gaze. "I don't own the schools," she replied. "They belong to you and every student who walks through their doors. My job is to make sure you have the tools you need to succeed." The boy smiled and Amal felt a surge of hope. These children, she realized, were the reason she had dedicated her life to this work. They were the future, and she was determined to give them every opportunity to thrive. Amal's journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, exhaustion, and even fear. She faced criticism from those who resisted change, and there were times when progress felt slow. But she never allowed these obstacles to deter her. Her family and close friends remained her anchor, providing unwavering support. Her parents, once skeptical of her dreams, became her biggest cheerleaders, often attending her events and sharing their pride with anyone who would listen. In her personal life, Amal found balance by immersing herself in the simple joys of everyday life. She loved cooking traditional meals, spending time in nature, and writing poetry. These moments of quiet reflection gave her the strength to continue her work. Years later, Amal's efforts culminated in the creation of the Amal Foundation, a global organization dedicated to education, empowerment, and equity. The foundation launched initiatives to provide scholarships, train teachers, and develop innovative learning tools. It also focused on addressing systemic barriers, advocating for policies that ensured every child had access to quality education. The Foundation's annual summit became a gathering of minds from across the world, a space where ideas were shared, collaborations were formed, and solutions were crafted. Amal's vision had grown beyond her wildest dreams, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. In the final chapter of her journey, Amal reflected on the legacy she hoped to leave behind. She often spoke about the ripple effect of small actions, how a single act of kindness or a moment of courage could spark a chain reaction of change. One evening during an interview, a journalist asked her, "What's the most important lesson you've learned?" Amal paused, choosing her words carefully. "That the power to change the world lies within each of us," she said. "It's not about grand gestures or monumental achievements. It's about choosing every day to stand up for what's right, to believe in our own potential, and to uplift those around us. When we do that, we create a ripple effect that can transform the world." As Amal looked out at the horizon, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had turned her pain into purpose, her struggles into strength. And in doing so, she had created a legacy that would endure for generations. Her story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the boundless possibilities that arise when we choose to believe in ourselves and each other. And as she continued her journey, she carried with her the knowledge that even the smallest light could illuminate the darkest of paths. Amal's story continued to inspire people across generations. Her work with the Amal Foundation didn't just change education. It revolutionized how communities approached inclusivity, equity, and collaboration. Her initiatives became a blueprint for global change, transcending borders and bridging divides. One of the most profound impacts of Amal's work was seen in communities previously plagued by prejudice and division. In one rural area, a school that adopted Amal's model became a hub of unity, bringing together families from different backgrounds. Parents who had once been suspicious of one another were now organizing joint cultural events, sharing meals, and learning about each other's traditions. The students were the most remarkable beneficiaries. With access to resources, mentorship, and a curriculum that celebrated diversity, they began to dream bigger. Many went on to become leaders in their fields, crediting their success to the values instilled in them by Amal's work. On the 20th anniversary of the Amal Foundation, a grand event was held to honor her legacy. It was hosted at a newly built education center that bore her name. Attendees included world leaders, educators, and countless students whose lives had been transformed by her efforts. Amal was the guest of honor, though she humbly reminded everyone that the event was not about her but about the collective achievements of those who had embraced the vision. During her keynote speech, Amal shared a poignant story from her early days. "There was a time when I doubted everything," she began. "I wondered if I was capable, if I was enough. But then I realized something powerful, that the very things we believe are our weaknesses can become our greatest strengths. My hijab, my identity, my struggles, they were not barriers. They were bridges." The crowd erupted in applause, but Amal's words were not just for praise. She hoped they would resonate deeply with anyone who had ever felt marginalized or underestimated. Amal's family, who had once hesitated to support her bold ambitions, were now her proudest advocates. Her father often shared her story with his friends, while her mother beamed with pride at every mention of her daughter's name. Her siblings, who had been her childhood protectors, now marveled at how she had grown into a protector for others. One particularly touching moment came when Amal's former teacher, the one who had once mocked her, reached out to apologize. The teacher had seen Amal's rise and had been deeply ashamed of her past actions. Amal met with her privately, choosing forgiveness over resentment. "I'm not the same person I was," the teacher confessed tearfully. "You've taught me what it truly means to be an educator." Amal smiled gently. "Change is the most beautiful thing we're capable of," she replied. "What matters is what we do moving forward." As Amal's influence grew, she began to focus on issues beyond education. She tackled global challenges like climate change, healthcare access, and economic inequality, always tying them back to the power of knowledge and unity. Her ability to connect seemingly disparate issues made her a sought-after speaker and advisor. In one notable project, Amal worked with a coalition of leaders to bring solar-powered schools to remote villages. These schools not only provided education but also served as community centers, offering resources like clean water and internet access. The project became a model for sustainable development, demonstrating how education could be a catalyst for broader change. Despite her global success, Amal remained grounded. She often returned to her hometown, where she would visit the very school where her journey began. She loved speaking with students, sharing her story, and reminding them that greatness could emerge from the humblest beginnings. During one such visit, a young girl approached her shyly. "Ms. Amal," the girl said, clutching a notebook, "can you sign this? I want to be just like you when I grow up." Amal knelt down to meet the girl's gaze. "You don't need to be like me," she said warmly. "You just need to be the best version of yourself. And I have no doubt you'll achieve amazing things." In the twilight of her career, Amal began writing her memoir, titled Bridges of Hope. The book chronicled her journey from her struggles as a teenager to her rise as a global leader. It was filled with anecdotes, lessons, and reflections, offering readers a glimpse into the heart and mind of a woman who had dedicated her life to making the world a better place. The memoir became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. Readers from all walks of life found inspiration in Amal's words, and the book sparked conversations about resilience, leadership, and the transformative power of education. On her 50th birthday, Amal received a surprise tribute from the global community she had impacted. A virtual event was organized, featuring messages from students, teachers, and leaders whose lives she had touched. Each message carried the same theme: gratitude for her unwavering commitment to creating a more equitable world. One message from a former student brought Amal to tears. "Ms. Amal," the student said, "because of you, I dared to dream. And because of your example, I dared to act on that dream. Thank you for believing in us when we couldn't believe in ourselves." As Amal listened, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Her life's work had not been in vain. The ripples she had created had turned into waves, reaching corners of the world she had never imagined. In her final public appearance, Amal stood before a crowd of thousands, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "The work we do today is not just for ourselves," she said. "It's for the generations that come after us. It's for the world we want to leave behind." The crowd erupted in applause, but Amal's mind was already on the future. She knew there was still so much to do, so many lives to touch. And she was ready to continue, one step at a time, building bridges of hope wherever they were needed.